Welcome to the Monday Monologue. Well, today we've got tube gear, solid state gear. We're going to deal with both. First, let's talk about the solid state gear. Told you I wanted to play around with some solid state gear so I could have something to run my tube preamps through, because I know a lot of people that are buying tube preamps, that's what they're using them for, is to drive solid state amplifiers. And I know a lot of people are using these Class D amplifiers, and so I got this little micro Class D board. Still need to get a powerful enough power supply before I can really test this. So the next thing, somebody sent me a message, said you need to take a look at these past ACA amplifiers, that they're like all the rage. People are like talking about how great these are. This little single-ended discrete transistor stereo amplifier. And first I bought a couple of these little boards when I was ordering this other little board amp, and got a pair of these for like $20. But then I started looking at what it was going to take to get a power supply and heat sinks and put it into a case, and I've already got so many other projects, and I found this little amp that was pre-built with these same boards. Came with a nice case. See, it's like a power amp. It's got the jacks, the power supply, everything all built into it. And it was like $130 plus shipping, which of course, one of those chi-fi sites, they get you on the shipping. But just under $200, I thought, why not? Let's get this thing, and then I can just test it. And, you know, everybody's talking about how great they are. And, guys, I'm like trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, they say this is a 5-watt amp. I can't even get a quarter of a watt of power out of it without the distortion just going off the scale. So I did some more research online, and over at ASR, Amir tested one of these, and while he got a little better performance than I did, he came to the same conclusion that this thing is junk, that it's just horribly high distortion. So I hooked it up, listened to it, and for being so just ridiculously high distortion, it sounds better than it has any right to. But you can definitely hear like all the details of the music are just being smeared out. And I have to attribute that to the distortion that is in this thing. And again, you'd have to hear it to understand what I'm talking about. And again, I'm surprised that it sounds this good when it measures this bad. But then again, it reminds me of the A12 amp. And if you didn't have anything to compare it to, you might go, hey, that sounds pretty good. But then when you compare it to a good amp, you realize how bad it really is. And I'm going to do some more investigating and see if maybe the trimmer pots are just set way off, but out of the box, this is just horrible. So then the other thing someone told me about was this little Pass H2 preamp that's supposed to introduce a little bit of harmonic distortion into the signal to give it some warmth in kind of what we're trying to do with tube gear. And I thought, cool. Let's try that. You read the reviews. People are, oh, this thing sounds so great. It transformed my system and all this stuff. Well, again, here's the little circuit board that you can get off DIY Audio. And by the way, DIY Audio also sells these ACA Amp boards. Here it is put into a little case with a power supply. And again, I hooked this up and it sounds horrible. I mean, like, this had distortion that, like I said, it was surprising it sounded as good as it did for how bad it measures. Although you can hear it, this was just audible garbage. Now, when you lower the signal through it to a 0.5 volt RMS, and I'm going to have to monkey around with some resistors on here to make this thing unity gain so that it doesn't output more than a 0.5 volt RMS. It does measure a 1% distortion. See what that sounds like. But how many amps run off of half a watt RMS input. I mean, I know some of these Chi-Fi amps do, and maybe some solid state amps do too. But I designed my amps to run off 2 volts RMS, which is what comes out of a CD DAC or out of a DAC. And if you run full volume out of a DAC or a CD DAC through this thing, I'm telling you, it sounds horrible. I mean, it sounds worse than a landline with bad connection. And I guess that's going to be kind of my rant today. We get this DIY audio website, right? And these guys are supposed to be like the most anal, critical, it's got to be perfect audio website on the planet. And they are selling these boards and promoting this stuff. And if you go read the forum on this, all these folks are talking about how great this thing sounds. And it sounds horrible. And I mean, I double checked these voltages they have on the little envelope to set it at. I tried going up and down. Didn't make any difference to speak of. I mean, it changed the distortion profile just a little bit. But, at 2 volts RMS, it's just off the scale on how much distortion this thing makes. And so the same website where when I upload one of my designs, these guys run them through Spice, and then they say, we're getting, 1.5% distortion at full volume. That's just ridiculous. That's just a noise distortion box. And nobody should be building anything like this, right? But these same people are silent with this stuff that's 20% distortion going through it. So then I put my color preamp on this same site, show the results from it, show that it's adjustable from like 1% distortion down to 0.1% distortion on how you set the preamp up. So these same people are saying, 1% distortion isn't enough to even hear. Why are you bothering? So on one hand, an amplifier that makes 1.5% distortion is ridiculously high and nobody should build it because it's unlistenable to. But then if a preamp does that, they're like, I don't know why you're bothering. 1% you won't even hear. So which is it? Do you not hear the 1% that the preamp makes, but the 1.5% that this tube amp makes is too much to bother even listening to? And it's just baffling to me. I'm getting to the point that I think these online internet forums about audio gear, all people want to do is argue about stuff. And it doesn't matter what it is, you're going to be wrong. And so, anyway, we're going to do more on this ACA Amp. I'm going to show you the testing of it. I want to give it the benefit of the doubt. I want to go in and adjust these little pots and there's a test point in here that's supposed to be 10.5 volts or half of the input voltage or something. I'm going to double check that and make sure that's right. Then we're going to run the test on it. And if it's still as bad as it is, you're going to see, don't waste your money on one of these things. And I don't know if it's, Nelson Pass is just some famous guy, kind of like Bob Carver, and he's got a name for himself, and now like anything he makes is gold, and they just sell it and make money. I don't know what's going on. But to me, it's just unlistenable to. So let's look at the KT120 monoblock. What do y'all think of these white transformers? Thermatic Labs sends theirs in white, so I decided to paint my Hammonds to match, and I think they look cool. Very different look. And I think this is the layout that I'm going to go with. Power transformer, choke, monster output transformer is going to sit up here. Got it away from the power transformer and turned 90 degrees. Got 3-finger gap between it, so that'll keep any kind of noise from transmitting between the two. 5AR4 is going to sit right here. Going to put the meter here to measure the current going through the tube, because this is going to be a fixed bias single-ended amp. KT120 tube is going to go right up here in the front. Then over here on this side, the little 9-pin 60J7 driver tube is going to sit right here. Decided I'm going to put the input jack kind of right here in the corner of this transformer, and then run the input cables down the middle of the amp. This is going to be the outside. Put the speaker jacks on the back, so it's got a nice clean look. And then on the front, just going to have one of those angel eye power buttons. I was just going to leave it blank, but I think it'll look good with one of those angel eye pilot light kind of power buttons just right here in the front in the corner. So I'm going to do that, and then I think that's kind of going to be it. We're going to have the bias adjusters up here in the front. Going to have a switch to turn on the meter, and then have a bias adjusters here. And again, I'm going with fixed bias on this for a couple of reasons. A, I've been wanting to build a single-ended fixed bias amp just to see how that works out. Second reason, I want to have as much voltage across the tube as I can. These KT120s really sing at high voltage. If I use a cathode resistor type bias on it, we're going to lose about probably 70, maybe even 80 volts across that resistor, which means the B plus would have to be just stupid high. And by using a fixed bias, you're basically grounding the cathode. We're going to be running it across a 10 ohm resistor for the meter to read as a shunt across. And so it makes the B plus that the power supply is creating actually higher voltage across the tube. Plus, there'd be so much power going across that cathode resistor from a KT120. It's just going to be making a ton of heat, and tube's already going to be making heat with these transformers and stuff, and just didn't see the point in wasting that energy across that resistor. The other thing too I'm thinking about doing, because it worked out so good on that preamp, I may put a 100K little trimmer pot here next to the RCA jack in case I sell these monoblocks to somebody that wants to lower the input sensitivity a little bit. They can do it with that pot. But again, I'm going to see what the input sensitivity ends up being. If it's not real sensitive, we may just leave that alone. So that may be just something we add on later. But anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this layout, what you think about the way this looks. And I may do this project a little different. I think I'm going to build the first monoblock off camera and just kind of take my time, get the layout like I want it, not be like panicking being on film. And then on the second one, I'll do all that on camera and show you how to build it once I get a little feel for how the layout works best. So stay tuned for that. I want to start on this soon. I do have a couple of other little quick projects that I want to do. A viewer sent me some phono preamps that I want to go over. One of them needs a little repair. The other one works, but yeah, it was a no bueno. But we'll go over that when we do that quick segment. And then we're going to jump right into this project and get these monoblocks done. So anyway, that's kind of it for Monday Monologue. Hope you're enjoying this channel. If you are, please subscribe. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon folks, as well as folks that have made donations to the site to make these projects possible. And we'll see you for the next Monday Monologue.